Words mean things. Featuring the myth of Arachne. Our first word is obscure. Let's look at some examples of the word obscure being used in sentences. See if we can figure out what it means. Compared to Hollywood, California, or New York City, Jerome is an obscure city. Dwayne Johnson and Robert Downey Jr. are very famous, while other actors are more obscure. Knowing how to cast magic spells is obscure information. So what do you think the definition of obscure is? A. Not well known. B. Very well known. Or C. Extremely interesting. I'll give you 10 seconds to decide. If you chose A, not well known, you're right. Jerome is not well known compared to New York City. Now, what type of word type is obscure? Obscure can describe a city, it can describe people, it can describe knowledge. Obscure describes a noun. What type of word is that? If you said adjective, you're right. Obscure describes nouns. Here's an obscure comic book, Squirrel Girl. You've probably never heard of it. Most people haven't. That's what makes it obscure. This is a word we're going to find in our story, Arachne. In the story, we learn that our main character lives in an obscure little village. So she lived in a little village that was not well known. Our second word is indignantly. We're going to look at some examples and figure out what it means. When I'm in charge of my sister, she whines indignantly. The students argued indignantly when the teacher made us all stay late. I was framed, I said indignantly, when I was accused of something I didn't do. So what do you think indignantly means? I'll give you 10 seconds to decide. If you said B, you're right. Indignantly means you're angry over something that's unfair. So what type of word is indignantly? Indignantly describes a verb, like your sister whines indignantly, or the students argued indignantly. What kind of word describes a verb? That's right. Adjectives describe nouns. Adverbs describe verbs. Indignantly is an adverb. This word is also used in our story, Arachne. In the story, we see that she speaks to some people indignantly. So she's speaking to them in a way that is angry over something that she thinks isn't fair. Our third word is obstinacy. Here's some examples. I knew I was wrong, but my obstinacy stopped me from apologizing. Because of my cat's obstinacy, I can't get him in the bath. My brother didn't want to do his chores, so he was punished for his obstinacy. So what do you think obstinacy means? I'll give you 10 seconds to decide. Yep, the answer is C. Obstinacy means you're not willing to change your behavior. Cats don't like getting in the bath, and little brothers don't like doing chores. So what word type is obstinacy? We can see that it's an idea, which is like a thing in your head. That's right, because obstinacy is an idea, it's a noun. Take, for example, the Titanic. The people steering the ship were told something could go wrong, but they had obstinacy, so they kept sailing, and we know what happened. We can see that at some point in Arachne, she shows obstinacy. Which means at some point, she has a behavior that she is unwilling to change. Then there's the word strive. The Avengers had to strive to finally beat Thanos. Every football team has to strive to make it to the Super Bowl. Because of the danger, animals in the wild must constantly strive to survive. So what do you think strive means? I'll give you 10 seconds to decide. That's right. Strive means to work hard or struggle. So what's the word type? Strive, if it's something a football team is doing or that wild animals are doing, is an action. You guessed it. That means strive is a verb. It's an action that is done. Remember Rogue Wave. Scoot had to constantly strive to keep her head above water and not drown. We can see in the myth we're going to read, there's mention of mortals who would try to strive with gods. So in the story, we're going to hear of mortals who try to struggle with gods. Our last word is descendants. We are all descendants of our grandparents. In a monarchy, a king's descendants eventually inherit the throne. All of Peter Parker's descendants had amazing spider powers too. So what do you think descendants means? I'll give you 10 seconds to decide. That's right. Descendants are people who come after. When a king has children or grandchildren or great-great-grandchildren, they become kings and queens. And you're descendants of your grandparents because you came after them. So what type of word is descendants? We can see that it's people or a person. Yep, that makes it a noun, or a plural noun, if you're talking about more than one. Look at this picture. These are some of the very first children who went to a public school in America. So in a way, you're their descendants, because you came long after them. In our story Arachne, someone tells her and her descendants to live on and spin. So they're telling her and the people who come after her. By now you should be ready to move on to your assignment. Arachne, Greek myth retold by Olivia E. Coolidge, Vocabulary. Now, as always, you got this.